Well, hello, everybody. So nice to have you with us here this afternoon, and welcome to this segment of Tech Beat, where leaders learn, innovate, and grow. I'm super excited to have my longtime friend and distinguished colleague, Dr. Rob Harter, on the show with me this afternoon. Rob and I have got a fun conversation planned. But before I bring Rob in, just to go over a few quick announcements and housekeeping items. First of all, TechBeat is now available on pretty much all major podcasting platforms. So look for us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google, Apple, Pandora, wherever you like to listen to your podcast. We would love a subscription, and certainly you can consume these podcasts, on demand. Consume them in an audio version, on any of those platforms that you would like. We would appreciate and love your support there. I do want to mention that we're going to have some question and answer time throughout the hour and at the end of the hour. So if you have any questions for Dr. Rob or for myself, feel free to post those on whatever platform you're joining us from. Dr. Rob and I will do our best to keep our eye out for those and answer them as it makes sense throughout the hour. By the way, I'm Earl Foote, founder, CEO of Nexus IT. Nexus IT is an outsourced white glove IT support and cybersecurity firm based here in northern Utah and servicing a nationwide, I'm having trouble with my S's obviously today, servicing a nationwide footprint and beyond. I did want to quickly mention that we have a super exciting lineup coming on TechBeat for 2022. Along with my guest today, Dr. Rob Harter. We also have in the coming months, Tanner Bell, the CEO of Ragnar, CEO and founder of Ragnar. Scott Paul. If you know Scott Paul, he's an extraordinary guy that's got his hands in all sorts of things, mostly an angel investor now that is supporting as many Utah startups as he can. And he's a total guru on all things crypto. Bassam Salem, the CEO founder of Atlas RTX, a friend of Rob and mine, is going to join me as well. Super looking forward to having Johnny Hanna, CEO and co-founder of Homey, on TechBeat in the coming months. Tim Cooley, author and executive director of the Park City Angels. James Jensen, founder, CEO of Jump, and the creator of The Void, will be joining me as well. Garrett Clark and John Bowers from Silicon Slopes will be on TechBeats later this summer. And Levi Lindsay, creative director over at Neighbor, who's a good friend of mine, just a zany, fun guy. He and I should have a good time. That's part of the lineup coming up in the months ahead. So keep an eye out for those. And I'm super excited to have them all on here on TechBeat. So let's get to the man of the hour. Let me bring Dr. Rob Harter up here. Rob is a nonprofit executive professional with over 27 years of experience in leading and building nonprofit organizations. For the last 10 years, Rob has served as the executive director of the Christian Center of Park City, a humanitarian and community-focused nonprofit organization with a bold vision to serve as a leading networker of community services based in Park City, Utah. Rob hosts his own podcast called the Nonprofit Leadership Podcast, is a contributing member of the Forbes Nonprofit Council, and chaired the MLK Junior Commission for Human Rights for the state of Utah, among other things. I know Rob serves on the board for the Park City Chamber and several other things as well. Rob loves deep powder skiing, hiking, reading great books, and traveling to new places. Most of all, Rob loves spending quality time with his amazing wife and his beautiful daughters. Has 3 daughters. One of these days, Rob and I are going to do the Yentl Tevier thing. That's an old reference. That
good reference though. That's a good reference. Yep.
Yeah, the younger audience won't get that, but
like, what did he just say? What was that?
Fiddler on the Roof. Go look it up. The movie. Well, it was
great
first
musical.
a musical. In fact, I was in that musical as a kid. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't know about it. But
oh wow, fun!
I was a bit of a thespian, in my youth.
What part did you play? Out of curiosity.
I don't remember. I don't
Okay.
remember. That's
It's
too
been
long
too long
ago.
ago. Yeah, seriously.
I was probably just an extra. I know my brother was one of those dancing guys, you know, that
Oh, yeah. Right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that Russian dance thing.
I love
Uh,
it.
anyways, look up the reference. I have 3 boys. Rob has 3 girls, and so
Should be a match there somewhere.
right. Your girls are far too smart and have their head on far too straight for my boys. But
that is too funny. We'll have another podcast about that. We'll talk about
right, right. So Rob, look, I know we've known each other for quite a while. You've been here in Park City for the better part of a decade, and we've known each other most of that time. And we've had the privilege to interact, to engage in partnership and help each other. Certainly, what you do and what the Christian Center of Park City does is really one of the most impactful and meaningful things that happens here in this community and beyond. And I personally, on behalf of the community, can't thank you and your team enough for everything that you've done. And we'll dig further into that. I want to talk a little bit more about all the amazing things that you guys are doing. But let's start with Dr. Rob Harter as an individual, as a guy. Tell us a little bit about your story. Where did you grow up? How did you get to where you are now? What was that whole journey like?
Yes, and again, thank you, Earl, for having me on the show. Truly, I'm an honored to be on the show, and you've done a great job of interviewing some wonderful leaders. So thank you. I truly take this as a privilege. So yeah, my journey a bit. So I grew up in a town called Columbus, Indiana, just south of Indianapolis, and people know about Cummins Engine Company. It's a very well-known engine company, and my dad worked for Cummins for years and years as an accountant. That's what brought him there. My parents live in the same house I grew up in all these years later. So I really was lucky, Earl. I grew up in a great family. I was the youngest of 5 total siblings, and we all stay really tight to this day. So it was a great place to grow up. I went to college in the Chicago area. Met my now wife, and I always joke, she dragged me to Denver, Colorado, where she grew up. That's where her family was from. And so we moved to Denver, and I lived there essentially for about 16 years and then moved to Park City. I've been here now for almost 12 years. And so I continue to move further west as I've grown and developed.
Very nice. Very nice. So tell me a little bit about maybe at what point in your life did you kind of decide that you wanted to do something, impactful and go into nonprofit leadership, and particularly, nonprofit type of organizations that are affiliated with faith per se, and, working to do, good in their communities?
Yeah, from early on, my parents really had a strong faith. They passed that on to me, and they always, I felt like they're a couple that really lived out genuinely this faith, and they certainly weren't perfect, but they were ones that didn't just have faith on Sunday and then lived a totally different life Monday through Saturday. They lived it throughout the whole week, and it was just a great example to me. So I think, again, I was lucky where I felt like I had a good example of what faith can do in people's lives. And they created this value of wanting to give back to the community, give back to just your neighbor, so to speak. And so I've always had that from a really early age. And yeah, I think early on, even in junior high and high school, I just had the sense I should do something where I was making the world a better place. I always had this desire. And so initially, my first foray into the career world, if you will, was as a pastor. I was a faith leader at various churches. It started, of course, in Chicago actually was the first place. I was a youth pastor in a large church in South Barrington, a church called Willow Creek Community Church. And then I moved to Denver, and then I was all various roles. I've been in small churches, started from scratch, mega churches of around 5,000, and just everything in between. So it's been a really fun journey to learn again what it's like to be in a faith community, and then to be a leader in a faith community. And then this opportunity in Park City opened up. And I'll quickly jump it in. I know you're going to ask some more specific questions, but one thing I'll just say that really has been a great fit for me, and probably one of the reasons why I've been here for 12 years now is the CCPC, really, the Christian Center of Park City, is an organization that really seeks to serve the entire community. And while I love my experience as a faith leader in a local church, sometimes you can get so focused on the church that you don't have time to serve the entire community, even though, of course, I always wanted to. Where now I have an opportunity where the organization I lead is a nonprofit organization, as you mentioned, a humanitarian organization. And the whole purpose is to serve the community. We are not a church. We don't have any services or anything like that. But our goal is to serve the community. And that matched really my DNA of wanting to work with all the churches. I work with the Interfaith Council. I've been the president, for example, and we work with city council. We work with corporations. We really ask the question, what are the biggest needs in our community? And how can we gather the resources to meet those needs? And that's just been a really good fit for me. And I think it started all the way back from my parents instilling those values in me and wanting to be part of an organization that gave back to the community.
Such a cool story. I really appreciate you, sharing that background. I've never heard you preach. I would love to hear you preach,
Absolutely. Anytime. I'll touch next time I'm speaking. Yeah, you got it. I was at Park City Community last weekend. Yeah, okay. Just for fun. It was great. Yeah. It's a great church.
I know, at the Christian Center, you guys, I know it's not affiliated with Christian Center, but you've hosted, church services on Sundays for other denominations. Is that still happening there? And do you ever preach there?
Yeah, good question. So again, we're not a church, but we host it and we let people rent. Anybody who wants to rent it, they can rent it. And so, one time we had 5 churches, if you can believe it, 2 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday. Then we had the major capital campaign, as you've seen, the major remodeling project. And so we had to kind of say, we had to kick everybody out, so to speak, because it was under construction. So at that time, most of them found places outside of our organization, but one has come back. And so we do have one on Sunday morning, and they've been there for a long time. I have spoken there before. It's a great church. Pastor, his name's Robbie Plemons. So that's been fun. So yes, we do host that, and we host events. We've also worked, one of our chief board member, our founder, is on the board for Harvard Divinity School. So another thing we've had is several messages, speeches, seminars that come out of Harvard Divinity School, which has been really fun because with this connection with Harvard, we've had the dean here. We've had several great speakers come through. So that's another kind of nice connection with people that are in the faith world.
Yeah, that's super cool. Please do let me know next time you speak. I'd love to.
I would love to. Yeah, I'll give you an invitation. You got it. Yeah. You just can't throw anything at me, okay? No rotten apples. Got to be on your best behavior.
Rubber chickens?
Okay, maybe. Put that into an illustration.
Yeah. It's not vaudeville, right?
Exactly. That's right. Totally different.
Wrong setting. So, Rob, let's shift gears a little bit here, and let's talk a little bit about the Christian Center of Park City. I briefly mentioned a few things, you have as well, but let's dig a little bit deeper into, what the mission is, what the Christian Center actually does day to day, and all of the, the services and all of the wonderful things that you and your team do that make a positive impact in the community.
Yeah, well, it truly is a privilege to be a part of this organization. I wanted to give a shout out again. Jim and Susan Swartz had the vision for this 22 years ago now. And the vision was really to provide a place where needs that were really going unmet were able to be met. And so it started, again, 22 years ago. The initial executive director was a gentleman named Tim Darlene. He came with his wife, Patty, and they formed the first team. He was the executive director and she was the finance director. And they brought their daughter, Tracy, who still works for us 22 years later, as basically anything that she needed to do that they needed her to do, she was willing to fill in. And now she's our Heber thrift manager. So that's how it started. And we've only had 2 executive directors in the history of 22 years. And I think that's lent a strong stability to the organization. And so as we've grown, I think that's helped a lot. But yeah, what is it? What's our mission? Our mission in short is this: to meet people at their point of need as an expression of God's love. And that's what we do. So we meet people right at their point of need. Now, there's a lot of needs out there. And so how do we kind of narrow that down? And so one of our goals is to try to be as holistic as possible. So our goal is to provide a safety net of services, really is what we'd say, and to try to be holistic in that. So for example, we have 2 food pantries, one in Park City and one in Heber. That's one where, you get to the most practical levels, feeding people. And that's a really important need, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit when it came to COVID. And then another big need is that we offer is what we call basic needs assistance. And that's essentially where people can't afford their rent. They've really hit hard times financially, and they have a car repaired they weren't expecting, or a medical bill that surprised them, or they're got laid off from their job, and so they were not able to pay their other bills like their water. So those kinds of things, we've always had this ability to work with those families, come alongside them, and figure out how we can meet what we call, again, basic needs. And then finally, we have 3 thrift stores. So if you're in the Park City area or the Heber area, you know that we have these 3 thrift stores that really people come from all over. I mean, people plan their vacation sometimes and they fly in and
Mhm.
go straight to our boutique because we get these incredible things like Armani suits and, Prada boots and these crazy things because we live in Park City and we have this wonderful boutique. And what's great about them, there are social enterprises. These social enterprises really help fund things like our food pantry, like our basic needs assistance and other programs that we serve for the community. And then the last thing I'll just mention is our mental health counseling center. That has started, that was about 10 years ago when we started that, and is now, Earl, the fastest growing program that we have. Partly because of COVID. The need now, I mean, you've heard it. I think you've had people on the show even talk about this. The need for mental health in our community, in our state, in our entire country is probably the biggest need that we can face now. And so that is something we're trying to respond to. We have 19 staff dedicated to our mental health counseling center, and we can't keep up with the need. There's still a need. We can hire more, and we're in the process of hiring more people because the need is that high.
Yeah. So amazing. And really, like, I can't commend you enough, and your team, like having been able to work fairly closely, in a supporting role, on the technology side for the mission of the Christian Center for the better part of, 15 plus years. And even before your original tenure, right?
Yeah,
And I want to come back around and talk about, the growth under your tenure because,
sure.
in the past dozen years, the Christian Center has really, really evolved. And of course, now, beautiful, beautiful new, campus, where you and your staff carry out, your day-to-day, work that you do to benefit the community, the counseling center, which, as you mentioned, 19 full-time, members of that staff, and most of that being, pro bono, counseling for people in the community that need some help with mental, mental health, mental illness, which is, we all know it's a real thing, right?
It really
and,
is.
and all of us struggle. I won't sugarcoat, that I've had my own bouts with anxiety and depression, and the stress of entrepreneurship, what it does to you sometimes, mentally
Sure.
is not easy, right?
Correct.
Certainly my struggles wouldn't be, wouldn't compare to some, but there's so many, wonderful things that the Christian Center does and and has done. I think that, for me, one of the really, amazing things as a member of this community that I've always really enjoyed is that the Christian Center is a unifying point for all faiths, or, I don't want to call it the lack of faith, right? For
Mhm.
those who choose to be agnostic, or even atheist, right? That
Sure.
doesn't matter. The mission of the Christian Center is to simply, as you mentioned, meet people at their point of need, and do good in the community regardless. And then you and your team have created this, call it a platform, where I've seen, all sorts of different faiths and churches and those who are outside of denominations, get involved, with what you and your team do, in this community. And it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. I know you all do, Hike for Hunger, for example, in the
That's right.
fall,
Mhm.
fundraiser to help, fundraise for your food pantry, right?
Yep.
I know that a lot of the grocery stores around town donate, their expiring food so that you can distribute that out to the community.
Right.
I've seen, the Catholic and the LDS and the Lutheran communities come together and support, the Christian Center. I see, the back to school drive that, the Christian Center does, and, how people come out in droves, regardless of their belief system. They come out in
Yeah.
droves to support, right?
Correct.
And it's just a beautiful thing. It's one of those things in our community in Park City that really, is a unifying factor where we can kind of find common ground, regardless of belief system, regardless of political, affiliations or whatever. It's been a really wonderful, beautiful thing. So I commend you and your team, for sure.
Thank you for
Um,
those kind words.
yeah.
Appreciate it.
I want to, key in on this, meeting people at their point of need.
Yeah.
This is a really, and I've seen this. I don't remember exactly when you kind of launched this, this new, call it a vision statement, or,
Mhm.
maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Is that about accurate? When the meet people at their point of need started to be, part of the mission here?
If you could believe it, it goes all the way back to the very beginning of the
Oh,
organization. I think it's
well,
one of the cool stories. But I think what's interesting, you say that, I think we've done a really good job. We try to be very intentional with leading with our mission, right? And that's really our primary reason for existence. And I think, you've had people on the show talk about vision and mission and how do you have a mission that's portable and memorable. And so I think about 7 or 8 years ago, we really said, hey, this has always been our mission. Let's make sure people know it, as opposed to going through 10 paragraphs of what we do. This is what we do. Boom, just keep it really simple because it sticks with people. So I think that's what, actually, ironically, I've heard you're not the only one to bring up, like, oh, this is what you do. When did you decide that, almost, right? And I was like, no, actually, it really does go all the way back to the beginning. It's pretty awesome. But I think it's how you emphasize that, going back to leadership, to really have your mission front and center. So not only just you as the CEO or executive director, but everybody in your organization can say it concisely, remember it. So if they're in an elevator, totally off of work, and they're bumping into somebody at the refrigerator or at the grocery store, I should say, they can say, oh, this is what we do. Here's our mission. So anyway, it's interesting you bring it up.
Fantastic. Well, and I was totally off the mark. I thought it was a newer sort of statement, but you brought up something really important, and I hope that the other leaders and founders that are watching this right now paid attention to that. You really talked about the why of the Christian Center, right?
That's right.
And that why is really one of the most foundational pieces of starting a business and really understanding. A business without a really solid why tends to be fairly aimless, whether it's a business or a nonprofit, organization.
That's right. Exactly.
Well
said.
I've been very impressed that, you and I were talking about my 20-year-old Isaac, who's launching a fashion brand right now, and watching him craft his why statement, was, and having intuitively, I didn't really coach him, with that, but intuitively,
right? Okay.
Yeah. And part of the process, he's like, yeah, Dad, I wrote up this really cool why statement, and he's taken some classes, some business classes and stuff. And so he's had some prompts, but it was really cool to watch that and then see, actually read that. I was kind of blown away by my 20-year-old. I was like, okay, there's a lot more depth there than I have given you credit for in the past.
I love it. Makes you feel so proud. Here he is. And he probably watched a lot of that from you. You lived that out, and so he's picked it up, probably watching you.
Honestly. Well, we try to be good parents, I mean, certainly no perfection, but so you talked, a little bit about the Schwartz, the painting behind you being one of Susan's works.
That's right here.
Yeah, and they are pillars of this Park City community, not not original Park City natives, but people who have made Park City a home and have been tremendously impactful, here, particularly through the Christian Center, and really gathering the community together to do, good for the community. And by the way, I mean, I want to, just maybe have you tell us a little bit more about the Schwartz, but I do want to just preface and say that when a lot of people, let me take one step back and I don't know if this stat is still legitimate, but 5 or 6 years ago, I saw a study that Park City has more nonprofit organizations per capita than any other city or town in the U.S. It's an astronomical amount of people trying to do really good things, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
I've heard it's between us and Jackson Hole. It goes back and forth. I think Jackson Hole maybe right now has a little bit more, per capita, but you're right. Small population, tons of nonprofits. So that is true. I've heard that stat from many people. I think Park City Community Foundation has mentioned that and cited that a couple of times.
Yeah. So I get comments of why the heck would, Park City need nonprofit organizations that are trying to do good in the community, right? Isn't Park City made up of a whole bunch of, hyper affluent people, that are all set? Right. And the truth and reality that you and I know is that, there's a blend, right? Yes, you have very wealthy people. We're not in that category, you and I. you have some working class people, right? Kind of, let's call it middle class people. Maybe you and I fall into there. And then you very much have a service class. A lot of immigrants. Beautiful, wonderful people that make up an important part of our community. In fact, you and your team host a Latino festival every summer.
That's right. Correct.
Which has been a lot of fun. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that. Yeah. And me, being very ingrained in the Latino culture, my wife being from Costa Rica, my kids being, Mexican American, that's all very important to me as well. And I very much appreciated that. And how the Christian Center has tried to unite community through understanding of each other's, ethnic backgrounds, and everything. So anyways, I know I rambled there and I apologize, but
no worries.
Coming back to the Schwartz, maybe tell us a little bit more about, their vision and how your interaction and work has gone with them.
Yeah, so they are just wonderful people. Number one, you're right. They're very generous. They have a heart to really invest in this community, and not just this community. They have another home in a different location of Boston, and they invest there too. So they, and it's not just like our organization. They invest in, I don't know how many. I just know that it's more than us. There's many people, executive directors of other nonprofits here in Park City, say, "Oh yeah, Jim and Susan are great supporters of ours." So I love how they've really modeled good philanthropy. And at the same time, she's an artist, as you saw this art behind me. And so what's been fun is, she is trying to use that art to, be able to not just show she is a very good artist, but also kind of as a platform to talk about her values. She's very much in supporting, efforts to keep our environment clean. You'll notice a lot of her paintings and her work around the environment, trees and images of nature. And again, her faith is very important to her. That also comes out in her paintings. But I would just say they are the quintessential people that you want on your board. They know what they want out of the organization, and they support me personally, and they support us, but they also know, hey, run the organization. We're not going to get in and micromanage you. We trust you. That's why we've hired you. And we're going to continue to give you input and support financially and otherwise. But so it's that great balance. I don't know if you've talked on this show before about good boards, but Jim and Susan really epitomize what it means to be good board members. And I know they're on multiple boards, as I mentioned, Harvard Divinity School and several other colleges. So I feel like we've benefited from them tremendously. And again, if it wasn't for their vision, we wouldn't have CCPC now. And, the millions of dollars we've given out through our food pantry over the 22 years and all the furniture. Maybe I'll tell you one quick story that kind of capsulates. I have so many stories, but I know we don't have time for all of them. But I'll tell you one story that really is what Jim and Susan kind of, in a sense, had a vision for something like this. And it just obviously organically grew over time. And here's a situation that will happen because of their vision to get this organization started. Okay, so this happened a couple of years ago. We had a call from one of our donors who regularly gives both financially and donates things to us. As many people know who are familiar with us, people donate every day, Monday through Saturday. And those items will go into our thrift stores. And then when we sell those thrift store items, that, of course, that supports our food pantry and other programs we do. All right, so we got this call from this lady who's just this wonderful person who has this great heart to give back. She was remodeling her Deer Valley condo. And so she gave us a call and said, hey, I'm going to remodel this condo. I want to give you all this house full of furniture. And certainly I know if I give it to your stores, you're going to sell it and it's going to be great, great cause. And so go do that. But if by chance you had a family that needed a house full of furniture, I would love for it to go to a family that really could use it. True story, Earl, we get that call. The same day, we get a call from somebody in Heber on behalf of a family that had lost everything in a fire. And the word is out there that you can contact our organization. If you've had a fire, that's what we have. We have furniture and clothes and all kinds of items that we can help restock, when you've lost everything in a fire. So this family heard this, and they were calling on behalf of this other family that lost everything in the fire. They had no fire insurance. And didn't have the ability financially to buy a bunch of these things back. So they called and said, hey, is there any way we could get some help with some furniture? A house full of furniture, in fact. And I'm like, are you kidding me? The same day we get a call of, I have a house full of furniture and a need for a house full of furniture. It was that's the kind of magic we get to do. We literally were just the networker between these two folks, this person giving, this person receiving. And so our receiving team was able to give and deliver all these furniture items for free, completely for free. They were blown away when we dropped all these furniture items off. We didn't know them. But they sure had a need. And when they saw these beautiful, really nice furniture items from a really nice Deer Valley condo, they were absolutely overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's what we get to do. Meeting people right at their point of need. Their need happened to be furniture. And so I think it didn't just provide furniture, but it gave them a sense of hope that they're not alone. and that there's good people in this world that would give a house full of furniture in this way. So that's just one of many stories I could tell you of just the great opportunity we get to do at the CCPC.
What a beautiful story. And isn't it amazing how sometimes serendipity just aligns when you're doing good, right? I mean, the same day. What are the chances, right?
Exactly. That's what we kept saying. This is meant to be. It just has to be. So, yeah.
And I'm sure that family, you know, having suddenly, you know, $20,000 and $25,000 couches and, you know, love seats. I can never afford that stuff, right? So, yeah, I'm sure it was a beautiful experience for them to have. And you know, having been in many of these homes myself, like you know, we're not talking about furniture that's worn out. That's, you know, maybe it's been there for 5 years, and maybe the people have been there for a total of, you know, 3 months in that 5 years or something.
Right.
So, you know, we're talking about stuff that's in really good shape. And that's the cool thing about the thrift story. Like, quick life hack, you know, if you find yourself in Park City or you need something to do on the weekend, you know, Rob mentioned it, but the thrift store is extraordinary because you can get, I've gotten, you know, like you mentioned, really nice suits at the thrift store for $50, right? Suits
exactly.
That would be $3,000, you know, even, you know, and stuff. So
that's right.
Winter gear, like, you know, coats and snow pants and skis sometimes and boots and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
The whole gamut. It's incredible. You're right.
And all that stuff goes to support your mission. Of course, it's funds that, you know, that are reinvested to help the community.
Exactly.
It's beautiful. So our mutual friend, David Rockwood, says, been living here in Park City for 42 years. Shout out to David, by the way.
Thank you, David.
Yeah. Says, raised 5 kids here and always impressed with the good works of CCPC. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Truly, that's a very good comment. Thank you.
Yeah. What a beautiful tribute. Thanks, David. So, you know, Rob, you mentioned, you know, millions of dollars in food, right, that has been distributed throughout the community.
Yeah.
What would you place the price tag on, you know, on, I mean, okay, so we're talking about food and furniture and thrift store and, you know, donations of clothing and, you know, whatever is needed, and the counseling in all of those services and goods. What do you think the overall impact, let's just say the last decade or under your tenure in 12 years, maybe you track this, right?
Yeah.
How many millions of dollars of good has CCPC done in our community in the past 10 or 12 years?
Yeah, you know, it's always a guesstimate, right? But we're based on, I'll explain where I get this number. It's over $20 million at least. And here's why I say that every year, and it's growing, of course, but we'll give out well over $1 million worth of food. And our thrift store, now, again, a lot of people buy things, but then we give out things too. So that combination, recognizing that, it'll be a little over probably around $2 million of goods, furniture, clothes, et cetera. So over the last 10 to 12 years, we've given a lot out. So again, it's been millions. And so that's really probably one of the most exciting parts. Maybe people ask, well, how do you come up with those numbers like for the food? Well, we are part of the Utah Food Bank, for example. We're an affiliate, if you will. And Feeding America is the national organization. So what they do is we collect food. You mentioned it earlier with all the area grocery stores, and you weigh that, and there's a poundage. And so they've come up, Feeding America actually is one that comes up with this formula. So based on the poundage of food, they calculate what that dollar's worth would be. And that's where we come up with a number of how much we've received. Then it comes up to, again, well over $1 million worth of food that is distributed through our food pantry. And then that can even be translated into meals. And so it's really, I'm a big believer in, again, good numbers and accurate numbers so that people know exactly what the impact is, because I do think this is getting a little bit into nonprofit leadership. I had someone on my podcast recently that said, you know, people have given to nonprofits over the years, often because they're really drawn to a mission or they have their heartstrings pulled into a certain direction. But it seems like donors of today, what they really want out of a nonprofit is measurable impact. So they want to know, how many people are you feeding? How many pounds have you given out? And so we track that. We want to know, and we want to be able to tell people, yeah, this is what we've given out, and here's what our opportunities look like in terms of our thrift store outreach, our mental health counseling resources, what that looks like. So anyway, so that's probably a little bit of a tangent, but that's what we would guesstimate. And then the mental health counseling service, it's tough because that is an organization, or it's a department that we have people there that spans the whole gamut of Park City. So what I mean by that is we have people that have insurance, and so they come through and so they're living in Deer Valley, right? And they're like, hey, but I have insurance through my company, and so they want to go see a counselor. Great. And then we have people on the other end that really can't afford much at all, and so we have a scholarship fund thanks to some wonderfully generous people in the community that support our scholarship fund. It's essentially a sliding scale. And so whatever they can afford, we say, great, we'll cover the rest. So we kind of do the full gamut. And then we have people in between that pay maybe partial payment and things like that. So that was a little bit harder to quantify, but I know that is our fastest growing service, and we serve thousands of clients every year. So that will just continue, I think, in terms of number of people that we're reaching through a mental health counseling center. In fact, one last thing I'll just mention, people may find interesting, is we did a recent audit of our clients, just in terms of where they're coming from. We found at the end of last year that over 30% of our clients are coming outside of Summit and Wasatch County. So we have a lot of people commuting in. Now, the primary place where they're seeing people is either through telehealth, right? After COVID, of course, they did telehealth, or they're driving to Park City to our main center there. So because of that, we've actually started a small campus, really, it's just one office for a counseling in Salt Lake, because so many people are coming again from outside of Summit and Wasatch County. So I anticipate that to grow, to be honest with you, as the word gets out of what we offer, because we have a child therapist, we have an APRN who can manage people's medication. We have several licensed professional counselors that work with marriage situations, depression, anxiety, you mentioned, all of those things. So we have a lot of different specialties. And as people realize that, I think we're going to see more and more people coming from the regional network, as opposed to just Summit and Wasatch counties. So that's been kind of exciting.
So that's so exciting, yeah, to be extending your footprint, beyond, the Wasatch Back community here, and obviously, I think the thrift store has been a really good ambassador for you to begin to get in the eyes and ears of people who maybe don't reside here or aren't familiar, and then
that's right.
Obviously, be able to extend or offer resources to the those community members that aren't here on the Wasatch Back, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, based upon what you said, it sounds like, first of all, I would just say, obviously, smart business and smart leadership to really know your data, right? To track, the information within your company and
Exactly.
your nonprofit organization, and then to know that, right, and know what the impact is. So to me, it sounds like $3, maybe $4 million of full impact in a year that the Christian Center is making in the community. Is that a fair assessment?
It is, yeah, and that's that's our food pantry and really our thrift stores, and then we have other programs like you mentioned, Back to School Basics, where we take it's been 800 to 1,000 kids in Wasatch and Summit County, where we let them go and we give them $100 a piece, and they go to the outlets here, the Park City outlets, and they get to shop for what they want. So that's another program that's separately tracked, if you will. So that's per kid, that's over $100,000, with $100 per kid, and then Operation Hope. That one's a little difficult to track, only because most people donate to Operation Hope. Quickly for the listeners, it's a Christmas program, and so we have an opportunity where we have a toy store where people come, and the parents of these kids can come and actually shop. It's all for free, but they shop for toys for their kids. And now COVID changed that a little bit. We've had to tweak it a bit, but we've been doing that now for several years. And most of that is people buy the gifts, drop them off at the center, and then we display them in this toy store. So, and that's a difficult one. Not everyone gives us the receipts of how much this is, but we're talking, every child gets 5 to 7, gifts, actually toys of all different types, from really big toys to little toys. Plus we give them winter jackets to launch the whole program. So every kid that needs the winter jacket gets that, plus other things that come through. So all to say, that's another one we could add. So yeah, it's really fun. And I really want to give a shout out to, you mentioned it before, my team. I couldn't do this all on my own. This is a team effort to get all this done, because we continue to grow in our services and our community. Like, if we didn't have the community that gave all this assistance and all this financial support and the volunteer time, we couldn't do these programs either. So I feel really lucky. We live in a community that wants to give back and wants to be involved and wants to give both their funds and their time so that we can have this measurable impact. So I really think it's a community-wide effort to provide these various programs.
Yeah. Maybe two quick comments as we transition, maybe a little more to the business of, Christian Center, Park City, sort of topics. But I know our team has always enjoyed, supporting that winter coat drive, which has been a long time staple in our community. A wonderful thing. There are, we have thousands of families along the Wasatch back, and even right here in Park City proper, or the outlying areas of Park City, that are in significant need at any given time, and so and winter is you and I know, I mean, you get, 2 foot, 3 foot snowstorms up here, we get a lot of snow. It's a lot of cold. I know we were sub-zero last night,
That's right. It's
and
cold.
yeah, it's important for those families and those kids, particularly, that are in need to have the resources they need to weather the winter, right?
That's right.
So kudos to you and your team there, and just maybe a petition to the community as we transition the conversation here that support. It doesn't matter where you're at, in the state, or even if you're not here in Utah. We have viewers that that watch this from outside of Utah, and so you're welcome to support the Christian Center and their mission any way that you see fit. You can always go to their website. There are opportunities to get involved. Corporate teams like us can get involved in supporting Hike for Hunger and food drives and coat drives and back to school drives and monetary donations, or donate your couches.
Exactly. That's right. Totally. Whatever you have to donate. Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about this a little bit here, Rob. So in your 12 years of tenure, the Christian Center has grown up a lot. I remember it being, a what I want to say, most scrappy sort of organization, 12 or 15 years ago, maybe 8 or 10 staff members, you've come a long ways. And I know you're a very humble guy, Rob. I know that's part of your DNA, but if it weren't for your vision and your work ethic, because I know it's tireless, to this behalf, the Christian Center wouldn't be where it's at today. So maybe tell us a little bit about, your journey as a leader, transitioning from pastor, and that's a leadership position. It absolutely is. Yeah. Sure. Leading congregations, leading people. It's, it probably in a even more challenging context, honestly.
In many ways. That's right.
Yeah. But transitioning into a nonprofit leader, and for all intents and purposes, a well-run nonprofit has to run like a well-run business. You have a budget. You have to figure out how you can work with your resources that you have available to you. You have to fundraise. Most businesses have to fundraise as well, or at least find capital somehow. So tell us a little bit about that journey and what your leadership journey has been, and let's start delving into some of the things you've learned along the way and that have been useful to you in building the Christian Center and really scaling it.
Yeah, thank you for setting that up. And so a couple of things to give some numbers for people. Yeah, so when I came, you were right on. We were a 9 paid staff when I came, essentially 11 years ago. And now we're approaching 70 paid staff. That doesn't include volunteers. Of course, we're a nonprofit. We rely on a lot of volunteers. But yeah, so 9 to 70 paid staff. And I think, and the other thing, budget wise, we're a little over $1 million when I first came. Now we're starting to approach $8 million on an annual budget, total budget. That includes everything. And I think a couple things I'll share that I've learned as a leader along the way. When I first came, you mentioned it was Tim and Patty just did such a good job. Like really, when I came 11 years, almost 12 years ago now, it was a good organization. Like it was healthy and it was ready to go to that next level. They did a great job of literally starting it from scratch. But it was a family-run organization. It's kind of like a mom and pop business. It was a family-run business where it was husband and wife, the primary two leaders, and then their daughter was helping with the thrift store, and then her husband David, again, who's with us. They just did a great job of doing things as a family. So they would serve, and then they would have dinner together and talk about what they did that week. I mean, it was very different. So when I came, that was different because I was outside the organization. I came from outside the state. I came from Colorado, and so what we had to do was starting to move this mom and pop business, if you will, nonprofit, to more of a professionally managed organization. Now that's not easy. Like as I look back, luckily we have a great team and we've been able to navigate through those challenges, but that was one of the most difficult things. And we're not even fully arrived there yet, but we're moving that direction to become more professionally managed and put in more processes and procedures. And I would say now the next challenge is a term that we have. One of our new staff members as of last year, she was actually working at the Montage. And so they had this term called perfecting the basics. And we love this term. So we've incorporated that. We're like, that's one of the things we're trying to do. And in short, what that means for us anyway is, we've grown quite a bit. And particularly in the last 3 to 4 years, we've grown, almost exponentially. perfecting the basics for us is we need to, as we grow, we need to make sure the procedures and protocols and systems are healthy and help further growth, as opposed to shut down communication and create, chaos in the internal workings of the organization. And so in order for us to be more efficient and effective and make sure we do have good communication, we have a good staff structure, we're working on perfecting the basics. And so we're putting in procedures and processes like our hiring process, how we do compensation review. All of those things are things that we're trying to really improve, because we can't just wing it. We're a much bigger organization now, and people expect that from us. And so how we manage things, one thing that we've done really from the beginning, but we continue to do more and more in terms of being more intentional about it, is we've always been audited. I'm a big believer as nonprofits, you should be audited every year. It's an expense, but really it's an investment. And why I say that is because when you're audited out from an outside organization, then you have someone else saying, hey, your books are clean, they're in good order, and you can give this organization knowing that you can trust where this money's going. I just think that's gold for a nonprofit, to make sure someone else is telling, coming in from the outside saying, yes, this is good. So that's important to us. We have an audit every year. And then of course the 990 is something you have to do. Every nonprofit has to do that. So you can always read about what our organization's like based on the 990, which you can look up online. So transparency, that's a big value for us. And so I just think that adds into this perfecting the basics. The more transparent we are, the more we realize, hey, we've got to make sure that our procedures and protocols are put in place so that we can continue to grow. You've probably seen this with businesses. Sometimes there's a stage where the startup is really effective and they're going great, momentum, and they're gaining more investments. They're growing, they're selling more widgets, and then they hit a wall and they just fall apart, or they can't quite get to the next level. And again, we're slowly getting there. For a nonprofit, that's been a lot of growth. Now for businesses, they can scale much more quickly because they have more capital. But all to say, that is a leadership journey, right? Where you're moving from a startup to all the way where you're trying to be professionally managed. And I guess I've learned a lot through it. I've made a lot of mistakes in terms of just like trying things. Well, that didn't work. Okay, let's try this. And
haven't we all?
Yeah, exactly. So I'll stop there. But that's been an interesting journey over the last almost 12 years.
Well, it sounds like you're running a bona fide business, Rob. I mean, it's all the same mechanics. And kudos to you for coming in, understanding the vision and the mission of the organization, and then saying, okay, how do we really take this to the next level? And understanding that procedurally, I really have to implement some things here and begin to make this a systematic sort of organization that it's predictable. We know, how we make things happen. And it's cool because just like in business, you're aligning strategy and initiatives and the actions that you take directly with the vision and mission, of the organization. And it's no different for any business, right? Any well-run business, I should say. The other, I think you mentioned something really, really, really important that I think is often missed by many businesses, and something that I think if businesses don't get this right in the modern world, it's a recipe for disaster, and that's transparency. I think it's so important. In fact, I just got off of KSL radio talking about Facebook. I don't know if you saw that their stock yesterday, dumped the largest decrease in record for Facebook stock. I forget, it was about 20%. It's down another 20% or so today.
Wow.
They missed earnings per share. Revenue actually was higher than their target, so it wasn't like it's not a massive crisis, but there's some red flags that Facebook needs to be paying attention to. But anyways, that's aside. What I'm saying is that from what I've observed, at least from Facebook and a lot of behemoths, is that transparency is not one of their values. And I think that in a modern world, we don't want to engage, and we don't want to support organizations, and we don't want to put our money in places, whether it's nonprofit and we're supporting something that we feel like is important, or whether it's discretionary income. We don't want to put that money there unless we understand kind of the ethics behind it and the mechanics behind it, right?
Right.
I think that's a very important point that you brought up. My good friend Trissis Sarmiento, who is very involved in Women in Tech and Latinas in Tech in Utah. Says, very impressive to learn the dollar amounts of donations, which speaks volumes of the people in our community that are so generous, which is absolutely true and beautiful. Josh Jemias asks, actually, Rob, who are your best partners? What type of people or partners, or organizations partner, with the Christian Center and support your mission in whatever way it might be?
Yes, great question. So number one, we work really closely with the local nonprofit sector right here in Park City. So for example, People's Health Clinic is a very close partner, partly because we serve a lot of the same people. The people that come to People's Health Clinic, which is offering medical care for those who don't have insurance. Most of those clients come to our food pantry, need rent assistance and things like that. Peace House is another organization we work with very closely. They're a domestic violence nonprofit. And so we actually have a lot of the clients that go through Peace House, they need clothes because sometimes they'll leave literally in the night and they only have the clothes on their back sometimes, or just one suitcase full of clothes. So one quick story, we had a woman who came and was at Peace House and had escaped her situation, and then was actually being put up into an apartment and was ready to live on her own. And so she met with, at the time, our basic needs assistance coordinator, and he had gathered a bunch of furniture and other clothes and even toys for her kids. She was a single mom. And so I still remember the day when we met with her and we brought, she had actually a U-Haul that she brought to get a few things. She thought it was just going to be a few things. We had stored up a whole U-Haul full of furniture, clothes, toys for her, so that when she launched into her own with her apartment, she actually had some things to put into her apartment. So that's a fun partnership again with Peace House. They do great work, and that's one of the things that we can work with them on, is providing what we have a lot of. And of course, food is always something that we can offer to people. So those, I'd say those, like, again, local nonprofits. We have worked also with statewide nonprofits, particularly with our mental health counseling center now. We're trying to really build some partnerships. Intermountain is a great partner with us. And then, of course, the Huntsman New Mental Health Facility, Dr. Rappaport, actually, we met with him. That is, many people in Utah anywhere are familiar with that. Just like they have the Cancer Institute that's world renowned now, they're really wanting to invest in this very large mental health facility for the state of Utah. And so we're working with them. So I think now, as our mental health counseling center is growing, now we're reaching into new partners that have a mental health focus. One other partnership, if you will, that kind of goes beyond this Park City and Heber area, and I don't want to go too much into depth, but a real quick summary. I reached out to multiple nonprofit humanitarian organizations that are in other mountain towns. And I was prompted during COVID because I was starting to realize that mountain towns had very similar situations like we had, where you had this economy that completely shut down during COVID because we were based on the ski industry. And so when the ski industry shut down, well, guess what? The restaurants did, the hotels did, and all the working class that was where the jobs were. They lost their jobs immediately. And this was happening in Jackson Hole, in Sun Valley, in Breckenridge. You go through all these lists. So I just reached out to a bunch of different nonprofit organizations and formed the Mountain Town Coalition. And it's now we get together, we've done 4 different gatherings now. It's all been through Zoom. And essentially it's sharing best practices. What are you learning? What have you made mistakes on? And what are the biggest challenges facing you? And I've realized through those conversations, mountain towns across this country, again, are facing the exact same issues: affordable housing or lack thereof. The working class that are working at these resorts can no longer afford to live here. So there's a transportation issue, and that causes environmental impact. And so those are 2 of the biggest issues. And right now is the biggest issue, because you can't afford to often live in these mountain towns. There's a major labor shortage. And so they left and they didn't come back because they can't afford to live in these mountain towns. Or their commute, they decided, you know what, driving an hour to this mountain town was just not, to this job, wasn't worth it. I need to find a job that's closer to home. So there's some real interesting overlays. So again, I could ramble on a bit, but that's been a really fun, personal enriching thing. And I think it's been really helpful for all the partners to learn, hey, they're not alone. We're doing similar work. So let's work together to support each other, because these needs are pretty big.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And, again, parallels to business, right? Most of us businesses form peer groups. We form best practices groups, right? To learn from each other and figure out what's working in your market, what's not working here. You've done the same with nonprofit organizations, a very, very smart strategic business move, as well. So many great things there, the People's Health Clinic and the Peace House, really great, other great pillars of, nonprofit activity in our
Definitely.
in our community that really makes, Park City a beautiful, unique place to be. So Trissa has another question. I wanted to actually, kind of dive into some of your biggest leadership lessons in our final minutes here, but I think this is an important question. So let's go there. Trissa says, a quick question. What advice would you give to a new startup nonprofit in how to effectively solicit donations, sponsors, and supporters? More specifically, best way to communicate vision and instill belief when you don't have measurable results yet?
That is a great question. And I think the clearer you can be on your mission, number one, and what is the need that you're meeting that no one else is meeting. So you're, in a sense, there's a problem that you're solving. And so the more compelling you can be to say, here's how I'm going to solve this problem. Here's our mission. I think people will buy into that without measurable results. Now, you can't do that for long. Like, you got to start, once you get going and you get the funding initially, maybe it's like a startup company. You get that initial investment of private investment capital money, and then you need to show that you're making progress on that. In the same way, the nonprofit world, once you have a vision, I think you can win people over with a clear mission. Again, you're meeting a need no one else is meeting. You're solving a problem no one else is solving. And here's how you're going to do it. You have a clear plan. And then I would say also, before you cast the vision on a wide scale, go to some people that would be very open to supporting you right off the bat. So in other words, have 3, 4, 5, 10 people that have invested already and said, yes, I'll give you $25,000. I'll give you $50,000. I'll give you $1 million would be great. But get some people that would be willing to invest in the front end on a kind of a private way of asking for that support. And then go on a large scale, go on social media, go really cast that vision wide and say, I've already got 10 people and I've already raised $500,000. But what I need is I need another $2 million to really get this launched, whatever the money is. So that gives you credibility that people have already bought into your vision privately, but now you can say that publicly. And I think that'll encourage other people to say, okay, good, I'm not the only one that you're going to rely on for this nonprofit to get off the ground. And obviously someone else has believed in you, so I'll give you a shot. And they may test you out with just a little bit of income or a little bit of a donation. And then the more you can live out that mission, the next time you go to them, say 6 months later or a year later, you can show them the results of what you've started. And then I guarantee they'll give you another donation. So that's my best recommendation to start in a short amount of time.
Hey, fantastic recommendation. Really, really good. Again, the parallels between nonprofit and business are just, they're really uncanny, It's the same thing in business. You need a solid vision. You need a solid mission. You have to be solving a unique problem, right? That is a real problem with an addressable market, which in nonprofit, you have to be doing the same.
Yeah.
So, when you're going to try to find investment capital in a business, again, that vision, that mission, what's the pain you're solving, right? What are the gains you're offering? So pains and gains, right? And then you get some initial investment. You have to you have to show that you're a good steward of that investment and that you can create results and impact out of it. And then you can continue the cycle, right? And amplify the cycle. Yeah, fantastic advice. Rob, this has been such a fun, hour. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, really, for joining me. I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate the things you do in the community here. I know, this isn't just, Rob Harter, having an executive level job at a nonprofit organization. It's Rob Harter, heart and soul, into doing something meaningful. And your family. I've seen your wife and your daughter's support, and the community get behind you, in that same right. So,
thank you.
In our parting minutes here, maybe if you could just share what's the most meaningful kind of leadership lesson that you think you've learned over the past 12 years of scaling, Christian Center of Park City?
Oh, that's a great question. In a short amount of time, I'd say two things. I think leadership, good leadership, is a person who's learned to be a lifelong learner. In other words, if you want to be a good leader, always learn from others. I think I'm always trying to learn from you, listening to podcasts, reading books. A good leader is a learner. And so I think that's number one. And number two, humility. I feel like humility is one of those leadership traits that doesn't get talked about a lot. There's not a lot of books about how to be a really humble leader, but I think humility is important. Why? Because it means you're willing to learn and you're willing to, say, I made a mistake, and own up to something with your company or your nonprofit. And I think people are drawn to those who are humble. So I think if you're a lifelong learner and you try to really be genuinely humble in your leadership, I think people will lean in and want to be part of your organization.
I couldn't agree more. Really great words of wisdom. Rob, again, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for the audience, our guests that have joined us this hour. This has been such a fun hour in conversation. I hope that it's been valuable for everybody. It's certainly been a warm, fuzzy hour for me because I really believe in what you and the Christian Center does. And I've seen the impact in our community, and it's quite extraordinary. Just quickly to remind everybody, keep an eye out. We've got an all-star cast of a roster coming up here for Tech Beat, including Tanner Bell, Scott Paul, Bassam Salem, Johnny Hanna, Tim Cooley, James Jensen, Garrett Clark, John Bowers, Levi Lindsay, and others that will be on over the next 6 to 9 months here on Tech Beat. So keep an eye out for announcements on those segments. Rob, my friend, have a beautiful day. The best to you and your team and your family at Christian Center. And thank you again for our audience for being here this hour with us. We're going to sign off.
Thanks so much.
See you later.